All right, so what we are looking at here is the eye, okay, our main sensory receptor for vision. Okay? And we're going to start here with the lacrimal gland. Okay? So the lacrimal gland is on the lateral portion of the eye. And so the lacrimal gland makes tears, and then the tears would be dumped on the surface of the eye and actually move medially towards the little holes. You can't really see the holes on here. They didn't put holes here, but that's where the puncta would be. So you'd have a lacrimal puncta on the inferior portion and the superior portion. The puncta then connect to these canal-like structures here. So we have a superior lacrimal canal, and we have an inferior lacrimal canal. And these are going to merge into this structure on the medial side, which is the lacrimal sac. And then the lacrimal sac will eventually drain. It's not on this model, but it'll eventually drain into a nasolacrimal duct. Going back to the anterior view here, we also see the eyelids. These are the palpebra. So this would be the superior palpebra and inferior palpebra. They both meet at these junctions. So this would be a lateral angle. Okay. This would be a medial angle. Or we call them the lateral canthus and medial canthus. To move the eye, we need a muscle, or to move the eyelid, I should say, we need a muscle. So this is the levator palpebrae superioris. This is what lifts the upper eyelid. Also going around the eye, not seen on this model, you'd have the orbicularis oculi, and that would allow the eye to actually close. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these external structures. And so now what we're looking at here is the actual eyeball itself. What you'll notice is that the eyeball has this outer tunic layer called the fibrous tunic. And the fibrous tunic has a white portion called the sclera. And then it also has this transparent portion called the cornea of the eye. No blood vessels so that light can pass through it. So sclera and cornea. Attached to the sclera are muscles. Notice the superior rectus muscle. We have a lateral rectus muscle. We have a medial rectus muscle. We have an inferior rectus muscle. Then we also have another muscle right here moving obliquely. This is called the inferior oblique muscle. And you can see the tendon of a muscle. Sorry about that. You'll see the tendon of the muscle. Okay, that would actually come out this way and wrap around, and that would be the superior oblique muscle. Surrounding the eye, you can see this yellowish material down here in the orbital fossa, and this would be orbital fat. Okay, so orbital fat inside the orbital fossa where the eye rests. This is also another good view of the inferior rectus muscle, and you can see portions of the inferior oblique muscle. Right here you can see the optic nerve exiting the eye. So the optic nerve would be heading towards the brain, the cerebral cortex for the visual cortex. As we take the eye apart, which I did so gently, okay? So we took the eye apart. On the inside of the eye here, we have this pigmented portion of the eye with lots of blood vessels. This is called the choroid of the eye. So choroid of the eye. You can also see, lift this up, you can also see the iris of the eye. The iris is the pigmented part of the eye that gives your eye color. So if you have brown eyes or blue eyes or green eyes, that's coming from the iris. The opening in the iris, there's a hole in the iris, that's called the pupil, and the pupil can get bigger and smaller depending upon the contraction and relaxation of the muscles of the iris. So pupil is the opening of the eye. We're going to open this some more. So we're opening up the choroid here. Behind the pupil, we see this structure here. This is the lens of the eye. So as light comes through the cornea, passes through the pupil, it'll eventually pass through the lens. The lens is a biconvex structure. You can actually see that it's convex out this way, okay, and it's convex on the interior. So if you get a picture from it from the side there, so it's convex. Okay? as opposed to concave. Concave would mean to turn in. So it's a biconvex structure, and so what it does is as light comes into the lens, it focuses the light. It bends the light so that it'll eventually be focused on the retina. We'll get to the retina. In front of the lens and also in front of the iris, okay, if you can imagine this is a chamber, you would have aqueous humor floating in here. So there's a liquid inside the eye called aqueous humor, and that would give nourishment to the structure like the lens or the cornea or the iris. Also part of this choroid layer, okay, if you extend out this way, you can see this portion right here. This is called the ciliary body. It's right next to the lens. What's interesting about the ciliary body is there's muscle in it. And so the muscle inside the ciliary body is called ciliary muscle. And that's the muscle that actually changes the shape of the lens. So the ciliary body contains ciliary muscle, and we use ciliary muscle to change the shape of the lens. The only way that would work is if there's ligaments that go from the muscle over to the lens. Not seen on the model, but there are little tiny ligaments called suspensory ligaments that actually are attached from the muscle to the lens so that you can change the shape of it. Back behind the lens, you'll notice this big globular looking structure here. This is actually to represent what's called the vitreous humor of the eye. The vitreous humor is the jelly material internal for the eye to resist damage to internal structures. So you've got this gelatinous material that's protective internally. So we're going to remove the vitreous humor. And so now what we see is this internal layer right here, sort of changed colors on us now. Okay? And so this internal layer of the eye is called the retina of the eye. And the retina of the eye is where you have photoreceptors. Now, as you move anterior, you'll notice that the color changes. Okay? And so this is still considered retina, but it doesn't have photoreceptors. So the photoreceptors are back in here. There's no photoreceptors as you get closer to the ciliary muscle and the iris of the eye. So this is called the ora serrata. You don't have to know that for the exam, just for orientation purposes. Ora serrata and then the retina. What's interesting about the retina is there will be several important locations that you would want to know. I'm going to switch pieces here so that you can see them. Okay? You have this little dot right here that they've labeled. Okay? This is what we call the macula lutea. And the macula lutea actually will have a little pit inside of it, and that pit is called the fovea centralis. And what the fovea centralis is it's our highest concentration of cone photoreceptors. And so what we try to do is we try to focus light to the fovea centralis so that we can see the best. This is our highest visual acuity. So macula lutea with a little pit inside of it called the fovea centralis, where you have a high concentration of cones. So it helps us to see better. You'll also notice, again, the optic nerve, and we can see blood vessels entering and exiting. But the optic nerve, where it exits the eye, there's no photoreceptors there. So we also call this area right here the optic disc or the blind spot. So if you were to focus on this area, okay, if light was to hit this area, you wouldn't be able to see anything. Okay? So we actually have blind spots in our visual field because there's no photoreceptors at this location.